is Dr. Qayyum. Please, give the floor, sir.
Okay. I should say where I stand. I'm a former military man, a former academic, and now a businessman. So let me just make that clear before I start. I really don't have a whole lot to say about Christine's presentation, but I think I want to sort of bring to this discussion. There's a very interesting debate going on in India right now on the role of the army in Jammu and Kashmir. The Indian Army is assisting the civilian administration in Jammu and Kashmir for suppressing the militants in there. And there is a law in India that allows the army to conduct searches without warrants. And this is causing a great deal of distress amongst residents of Kashmir, especially Muslim residents of Kashmir. Now, the army's argument is that we are really not equipped to handle this problem. We are a military, we know how to fight, that's what we train for, that's what we do. And this is really a problem that should be dealt with paramilitary forces. So the army doesn't want to be in Jammu and Kashmir. The Indians, they have notified the government, and if we have to do, we need these parts. So I think the structure that Christine sort of puts out for us to evaluate civil-military relationship, I don't know. These are real practical problems in civil-military relationship. And I really didn't see indication or a sort of a direction from this analysis, if you answer that question. So, the reason I mentioned this is our recent experience when our two political parties could not agree on a caretaker government. The whole country looked on to the army to come in. The army is not at all equipped to do this task. Our intellectuals, our newspapers, our media sort of invited the army. Once the army got in, dissatisfaction was very quick. So I think, how do we sort of fit these type of situations in this framework? I don't know. I leave this question for Christine to answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Ashok, you have the floor, please. Could you have the microphone here, please?
My name is Ashok Nath. I'm from Stockholm University and specializing in the history of war and military culture. I've also got a military background, though a brief one, and I've also written the history of the Indian and Pakistan cavalry regiments from 1750 to 2007. So I understand the military and its thinking and the culture behind it fairly well. My question to you actually is, the molecules you presented, they're very interesting, but I feel that they are molecules which are based on a Western society's concept, because personally I feel it will never be possible to have long-term, viable civil-military relationships in countries where there are very diverse economic conditions and there is a big diversity within the society. For the simple reason that, for example, officers, soldiers, they are in the armies of India, Pakistan, and as well as Bangladesh. They are brought up in certain principles. There are principles of which they are taught and are supposed to replicate and to cherish. And these are of honor, selfishness, etc., etc. Whether these are done or not done, that's open to question. But vis-a-vis, certain molecules within the civil political establishments, that you find that there's a clash of values and cultures, which eventually results in the military getting wanting to take up, issues against this thing. So I feel that personally, unless there is a smoothing of the diversity between society, it will not be possible in countries like this. In Western countries, it's different because you have people, politicians and others who have had a military background. It's very natural. Churchill, everybody, they've all had a military background. They've served in the military or spent some time in the military. They understand certain set of values.
Thank you, Ashok. Our next question is a key question that we received from Mexico. The question asked to Christine was, where should the military's loyalty lie? Should it lie with the state or with the regime in power? It's a very straightforward question. And we go to the next question is Ambassador Haroon, please.
No, is there no question to be asked? Yes, I thank Christine for the thoughtful presentation. But I find the two issues are missing there, if I may. First is that civil-military relations has to be distinguished developing countries and developed countries. Now, in the developing countries, there are two issues which affect civil and military relations. A, the political, the poor governance, and secondly, the political confrontation. And third is sometimes in African developing countries you will find that the elections are rigged. So these kind of situations which lead to divisive society, and if it is a divisive society, then it leads to insecurity. Security of the state is involved. So therefore, you have to analyze, as my other friend have said, that the civil-military relations is very important in developing countries. So therefore, you have to put in your assessment that how do we meet the gap between civil and military in the developing countries. Thank you.
We'll take two more questions in this cluster, and Sir, you have the floor next.
I respectfully disagree that there's a difference between the Western civil concept and what goes on in developing countries. You can look at the militaries within Central and South America that have had a strong civil government that have developed. They've not had this type of conflict that some developing countries have had. There's always been what I think is more identifiable is whether or not the government has funding to allow the military to train to defend the nation, or whether or not that money is spent instead on politicizing or trying to influence military leadership in terms of the appeasement. So I think I'd like to hear a bit more about how appeasement plays into the civil relationship, because this is something that I can see both occurring in developed countries as well as developing countries. I think that's more of a key element that should be discussed.
We'll take in one more question in this cluster. Okay, the next question is from Dr. Sahir. Would you have the microphone here, please?
Thank you. I actually always wondered why Huntington had East and West at the center of clash of civilization rather than military and civil. And I never read the 57 texts, so there must be something in there. But you seem to have borrowed most of it from Huntington's 57 texts. And I will throw a few questions basically to get insights into what is the analytical framework that underlie many of the things that you're looking at. First is, what are the inherent characteristics of a military, whatever category you define, that shapes the CMR, be those good or bad? And there must be certain characteristics within that category called military. So I come from a background in economics, so I will basically refer to those kind of terms which are not commonly invoked. Second is, in a globalized world, this is, I'm trying to tie in with what we just said. In a globalized world, can one independently define CMR within a national law? That's the kind of third is, I mean, when you go into those 6 elements, who guards the guardians, there seems to be an assumption that military is a necessary evil. So all those 6 points that you are bringing in, and an assumption that civil does everything good. That kind of assumption underlies those 6 elements. I have difficulty figuring out why you make those assumptions, unless you explain those things. And one could then think through, because there is a necessary element in that necessary evil, one could think through of militarizing the civils and civilizing the military as a convergence for the greater social good. I don't know if there are insights that you can throw into those kind of issues would actually help understanding relationships. Thank you.
Anybody else at this moment would like to? Yes, sir, please.
Abul Hassan Chaudhry. If there is any such element as a former politician, I choose to describe myself as such. Well, I do have, in my days, had a look at Huntington. There are several aspects from which the world today obviously differs. In the sense that Huntington and later followed by Finan thought of the military as a great institution of modernizer and building of new concepts. The world has enormously changed. Of course, there are many elements to consider of the inherent thesis that was propagated by Huntington, and I thank the author for bringing out the many essential elements. The 2 points that I would like to raise is that I have a little problem in looking at compartmentalizing the army and civilian role, because it largely reflects, if you like, the history, the ethos. For instance, today is the Armed Forces Day, and as we celebrate today, the great coming together, union of the people of Bangladesh and the armed forces who have taken part in the liberation war to protect our history comes in. And similarly, dare I say, would be the case in many other countries of the world. So it is essentially a reflection of many national aspects. Secondly, and more importantly, ever since the time when the theories were being written, the world has changed tremendously. For today, the military in many underdeveloped countries, particularly in Bangladesh, have a supranational role. And regardless of which political party or whatever complexion happens to be in power, they will not ignore the army's role in the peacekeeping operations. And this new dimension of the armed forces, which has become somewhat integral to a very central role of the United Nations, lends itself an importance which is not just internationally recognized, but national governments take note of it. In fact, to my mind, very justly, as in the context of Bangladesh, feel proud of the many achievements that the armed forces have done. So this also, whether it is directly handed down or not, does influence the CMR in countries, as we have seen also in Bangladesh. Thank you.
Thank you. We now go to a video comment from Heidelberg.
ये